Greg, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure, Dave. Always a pleasure to talk about Virios Therapeutics.
Well, Virios is a clinical stage biotech company. You're working on and you have antiviral therapies that treat fibromyalgia and other diseases. Give us an overview of the story.
So the company was actually founded, Dave, on the principle from our founder, Dr. Skip Pridgeon, that many common viruses that infect many people across the globe, in fact, the vast majority of adults, can become activated. And that activated virus engenders an overheated or abnormal immune response. And the combination of the activated virus and the immune response can lead to the manifestation of diseases like fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, and other somatic syndrome disorders. Virios is actually targeting the fibromyalgia marketplace because there's rampant dissatisfaction amongst patients and providers for these particular disease sequelae. We have a very novel approach. We're combining antiviral treatments to treat these patients over the long term with the goal of getting an activated virus back into a dormant state and keeping that virus in a dormant state, and as a result, giving patients better relief for their chronic debilitating disorders. We've had a successful phase 2A trial that we believe validates this hypothesis. We've been granted FDA Fast Track Review designation for our fibromyalgia treatment candidate, the first time that's ever happened. And we have a team with deep experience in this particular drug development category. In fact, it may surprise you to know, Dave, that we've actually developed or commercialized 2 of the 3 drugs in the space. And we're fully funded through our phase 2B results, which we expect in the middle of 2022.
Greg, let's talk about fibromyalgia as a disease. What are the symptoms? How many people get it? What were your endpoints in your phase 2?
Yeah, great question. So fibromyalgia is a chronic disease whose hallmark symptoms are chronic pain, and very severe fatigue that persists for 3 or more months. This is a disease that impacts something north of 200 million people worldwide. Other estimates actually suggest that there's almost 500 million people across the globe who suffer from fibromyalgia as a diagnosis. It's quite debilitating. In fact, it may surprise you to know that patients with fibromyalgia have 3 times greater risk of committing suicide versus a general population. And this is a disease that when it flares up, forces 1 in 2 people to actually miss work as a result of the symptoms, giving you some insight into the severity of the symptoms that are associated with a fibromyalgia diagnosis. To date, there's only been 3 drugs approved to treat this particular condition, and all are CNS-mediated drugs, which do a decent job of controlling pain, but are not well tolerated. In fact, if you talk to people in the market, patients, doctors who treat these patients, payers, you'll note that all 3 cohorts are quite dissatisfied with available treatments. The reason being is most of the drugs are actually decent at controlling pain, but because they're not well tolerated, patients can't stay on for the long term. Our phase 2A trial demonstrated that IMC-1 not just reduced pain, fatigue, anxiety, and depression, but actually was better tolerated than placebo in the phase 2A trial. This could be a true differentiator for IMC-1 because we can deliver pain reduction, hopefully, presuming the profile holds up, in a manner that is well tolerated and such that patients can stay on the drug for the balance of their lives.
You mentioned earlier that 2 of the members of your team helped develop and market the 2 of the drugs that currently treat fibromyalgia. I want to talk about your background. It's very impressive, as well as your team.
I'm blessed, Dave, to be working with a first-class team and a world-renowned board of directors as we progress IMC-1's development. As you mentioned, our team, and I think of the team as both the executive team and the board of directors, have been involved in the development and or commercialization of Lyrica and Savella, which are 2 of the 3 drugs approved by FDA to date to treat this particular disorder. Mike Genro, our chief medical officer, actually worked with the FDA before any of the 3 drugs were approved to scope out the process that FDA uses to this very date, length of therapy, endpoints, inclusion, exclusion criteria that the FDA used to approve Lyrica, Savella, and Cymbalta. So he has a first-hand knowledge of exactly what's required to get a drug approved in this particular space. It won't surprise you to know that during his tenure at Cypress Biosciences, he actually developed and commercialized Savella. Rick Birch, one of our board members, a 30-year veteran at Pfizer, actually launched Lyrica for the treatment of fibromyalgia. During his tenure, we have a fantastic board of directors as well. Abel De La Rosa and Rich Whitley are world-renowned virologists. And just to give you a sense of how high profile and how well respected Rich is in particular, Rich actually serves as the chairman of the Data Safety Monitoring Board for all of the drugs in the Operation Warp Speed pipeline. So between our team and our board of directors. We've run this race successfully before, and we plan to do that again with IMC-1's development.
Well, it's a world-class team. I want to talk about your capital requirements. A lot of microcap biotech suffer from lack of financing. Not the case here.
Dave, we successfully completed an initial public offering where we raised over $34 million in December of 2020. That provides us with runway through the end of at least 2022. We're fully funded through the development of IMC-1 and the ultimate top-line results in the middle of 2022. Our goal between myself and the rest of the team will be to harvest those data, get down to FDA during Q3 of 2022, and scope out what the phase 3 requirements are for IMC-1's future development. And during that time, we can decide whether we want to go alone as a standalone entity or whether or not we want to partner, because we do believe a drug with this potential will garner interest from a whole host of other life science companies. And we'll choose the path forward that gives us the best outcomes, chances for success, and ultimately to reward our shareholders.
Greg, what is the overall market size for your drug?
The fibromyalgia marketplace, as I mentioned, is actually quite large. There's roughly 200 million people across the globe that meet the diagnostic criteria for fibromyalgia, but unfortunately, the vast majority of those patients are presently not diagnosed. But even using the existing framework of diagnosed and treated patients, you'll note that in the US alone, there are 3.6 million patients today that are presently diagnosed with fibromyalgia. About 2 million of those patients are treated. The market leaders in the category are Lyrica and Cymbalta. Roughly a quarter of those 2 million patients, or 500,000 patients each, are treated with one or the other therapies. Both of those drugs had sales in the US alone for fibromyalgia as an indication north of $1 billion, which we think highlights the potential for a safe and effective new fibromyalgia treatment.
The multi-billion-dollar market, fully financed through mid-2022. You've got data coming out before you'll need to raise capital again. And of course, biotechs move up or down based on the data. You have great data from your phase 2. It's a wonderful story. I want you to sum it up, the essential value proposition, in 30 seconds.
Happy to do so, Dave. We have a novel antiviral drug treatment, IMC-1, that is supported by mechanistic and clinical data. The novelty of this approach is reflected in FDA's Fast Track Review designation, the first time ever for a fibromyalgia drug candidate. We are targeting a very large and very dissatisfied market. As I mentioned, there's something north of 200 million people worldwide who need better treatments. And we have a management team and a board of directors who's delivered 2 of the 3 drugs that have been approved by FDA to date. In my view, we have the potential to change the world for these 200 million patients. And there's a virtuosity of getting it right for patients and rewarding our shareholders. And we're pleased to have that privilege.
Excellent. Greg, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure, Dave.